دين ومكارم وأخلاق ترفعنا فوق الآفاق.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome everyone to this session with Sahaba Academy. And this month, as you all know who have been following in Arabic, we're tackling and talking about atheism, how to deal with atheism. And alhamdulillah, in the English language this month, we have three lectures. First of all, with our brother Imran today, and then on the 27th, we have our brother Sabur Ahmed, who will be talking about Darwinism, and then myself on the 28th, inshallah ta'ala, discussing the new atheist movement. Today, we have a very interesting topic with our dear brother Imran Hussein. And Imran Hussein is a public speaker and an instructor for Aira and Sapien Institute. And he is currently completing his MA in Islamic Studies and specializes in how to take on atheism and nihilism. And he's going to explain to us what that is, inshallah. Because many of our brothers and sisters don't really know what nihilism is. Inshallah, I was just actually listening in detail to one of his seminars. And it's very, very interesting, inshallah. I'm sure that we'll benefit a lot from him today in that, inshallah ta'ala. So without any further ado, we'll turn over, inshallah, to our brother to let him continue with this seminar. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh McCarthy. Assalamu alaikum, everyone that's joined, inshallah. So we'll begin without further ado. Bismillah and alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So brothers and sisters, what we're going to be talking about today is Islam, atheism, and nihilism, or nihilism, whichever way you'd like to say it. This is a particular topic or an area that I've been really focusing in on for the past, say, 2 to 3 years. And there's a couple of things, inshallah, that I hope we would leave with by the end of this session. So firstly, I hope that we would have by the end of the session, we'll have more of a comprehensive understanding of atheism. But more specifically, the understanding we leave with today is going to be the type which allows us to never have any issues or problems with when it comes to dealing with atheism. We're never going to have any issues as far as doubts. We won't have any issues as far as the strength or the validity is concerned of atheism as a worldview. We're going to see it inside out. We're going to see the inner workings, and we're going to appreciate and understand how weak and frail of a worldview it is compared to Islam. But at the same time, a question that's going to arise is, well, if atheism is such a weak and frail worldview, a way of looking at reality and a way of looking at life, then why is it prevalent? Why are so many people, as we think, so many people in the world, in the West, and now why this is the case as well? And we're going to appreciate how this links to, especially the past 200 years of world history. And we're going to also look at this, and we're also going to then finally look at the connection or the link between atheism and nihilism. What is nihilism? How does atheism lead to nihilism? And we're going to finally conclude, inshallah, by looking at how Islam provides an answer to the problems that are created by atheism and generally secularization of the world, inshallah. So that's the sort of gist of what I'm going to be covering with you today. Shaykh McCarthy, how do you want to, is this just a presentation, or is it going to be Q&A? Sorry, just if you can clarify, inshallah.
No, inshallah, we're going to start with the presentation. At the end, there's going to be Q&A. So you have, okay. we have an hour and a half, but it's up to you how you want to divide that. Every now and then I might jump in if I don't catch you off guard, inshallah, if there's anything.
Inshallah.
But inshallah, it's very interesting because I was just listening to it. So I think it's a very interesting topic and a very needed topic in today's briefing. So you go ahead, inshallah. If there's anything at the end, our viewers can write down their questions, inshallah. We'll gather the questions at the end, inshallah.
Okay. So guys, bismillah. So the very first thing, let's begin with atheism. What is atheism, right? It's this entity that exists today that everyone is talking about. Everyone seems to be afraid of. The general perception that we have in our minds is that this is the way forward. You know, atheism, in our minds, there's a link between atheism and progression and science. And there is a lot of narrative that's out there, popular narrative, which seems to put atheism and everything progressive and modern in one side of the basket and Islam and religion on the other end of the spectrum. So atheism is not a standalone worldview. First thing I want us to appreciate. Atheism is a particular belief system or way of life which has many other, if you like, partner belief systems, right? So you would have naturalism, you would have misotheism, you would also have materialism. There's all of these isms that have come about, and they're very similar. There are some slight differences between them, but they're very similar. But atheism is the most predominant one that we hear of a lot. Now, generally speaking, when it comes to defining it, you'll get something along the lines of the lack of belief in a supreme supernatural being, or the denial of a creator, of a God, and so on and so forth. But when you speak to atheists, what you come to realize is that the term is used very broadly. Some atheists you come across would be individuals who would turn around and say, yes, I acknowledge that there is no God, right? Other atheists, you'd find, you ask them, well, you're an atheist, so what does that mean? They will turn around and say to you, well, I believe that there may be something out there, but I just don't know, right? Now, when you come across such claims, you realize immediately that someone that says to you that there may be something out there, I don't know, they're not really an atheist. If we were to take a general definition of the term for our purposes today, an atheist is someone who denies a supernatural being, a creator God, okay? Now, if you take that as a definition, and this is the sort of general summary definition that arises when you go through the dictionaries and you look at what the term means and how it's been used historically. According to that definition, very few people, you realize, fall into that category. Most people out there today, especially in the West, are people who call themselves atheists, but they're not using the right label. The correct label they should be using is that they're an agnostic, someone who isn't certain, someone that doesn't know. Maybe there's a God, maybe there isn't a God. We don't know. That's the position that they're really on. And in most cases, these people, they just don't have the time to, or the, how can I put it? Not the time, or they're just so occupied by worldly life that they just don't find the time in their lives to inquire about this question. They're on the fence, as they say. They're right in the middle. God can exist, God may not exist. I don't know. So most people are agnostic. Atheists are people such as, if I was to give you some examples today, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, these are popular examples that we all know of. Daniel Dennett, Hitchens, he was an atheist as well. Now, most of these guys that fall into this spectrum are people who say there is no God, there is no creator. Now, if we were to be more specific in our definitions, we can further sort of break this down and say that these individuals, most of these new atheists who say there is no God, are in most cases what we'd call naturalists, right? The philosophical naturalists. Now, a philosophical naturalist is someone who not only claims that there is no supernatural divine being, but they further claim that all that exists is physical. It's all matter in motion. There is nothing beyond the material sum of the universe, right? So they will be more specific. They would say all that exists is atoms and molecules, and everything that's formulated by these core elements of atom molecules. There is nothing beyond this physical system, right? Some, if we were to be even more specific, some academic naturalists would go as far as saying, even if there is something beyond this material space that we're experiencing, matter, all of the sum of matter, even if there is something beyond this, it has nothing to do with the physical system, this system made up of atoms and molecules, okay? So that's what naturalists would do. Now, most atheists, especially new atheists, are naturalists. So Richard Dawkins, I would say, is a naturalist. Someone that not only denies God, someone that enforces and claims that all that exists is matter. There is nothing beyond this physical matter that we perceive within our universe. Now, what are the problems that arise from this? To me, the fundamental issue here with atheism is that as soon as you claim that there is no creator, there is no cause behind this universe, as soon as you make this claim, what you're saying is that everything that exists, the universe, the things within the universe, us as human beings that are a composition from a physical standpoint of atoms and molecules, everything is a result of a blind, random, physical unconscious, dead process. That's what it's a result of. So everything that exists, including you and me as human beings, we are just one accident. It's just one big accident. This whole universe is one big accident. There was no intention behind it. There was no reason behind it. There was no cause behind it. Okay. That is the inevitable conclusion you have to come to. Though that is something you have to acknowledge as an atheist, as a naturalist. You have to acknowledge this. You have to acknowledge this. Now, once you acknowledge this, everything is one big accident, then you run into many problems. Many problems, okay? One of the biggest run into is the problem of nihilism. Okay, so nihilism, let me just define the term for you guys here. Nihilism, if I was to give you a definition, means that there is no meaning behind anything, right? Nihilism is the lack of meaning, the void of meaning. There is no meaning. There is no ultimate meaning behind things. Now, nihilism itself can be broken down into many different categories, and I'll cover some of those as we go along. But for now, it's important that we appreciate at least generally that if you are an atheist or a naturalist, and you say there is no cause, there is no God, there is no creator, that's what they say, then everything by extension is one big purpose or cause behind it. It's random. It just happened. It's like they say in English, spilt milk, right? Spilt milk, at least according to them, has no purpose. It just happens. It's an accident. Accidents aren't planned. They just happen. If everything is an accident and we are an accident, that means everything about us as human beings is accidental. Then where is the meaning? Accidents don't have a meaning. They, as human beings, have no meaning. They have no purpose. Now, why is human life having no meaning or no purpose a problem? Right? This is another thing we have to tackle. Because if you go to an atheist and you say to them, well, as an atheist or a naturalist, you have to acknowledge that your life has no meaning. Why can't they just turn around and say, yeah, and sometimes they do, yeah, my life has no meaning. I have no purpose. Why is that a problem? Right? It's a very big problem for many different perspectives, but fundamentally it's a huge problem because as human beings, we see the world through the lens of meaning and purpose, right? Now, let me sort of elaborate upon this point for you. Everything we do as human beings, from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep at night, everything is done with a purpose. There is meaning behind our actions. From getting out of bed in the morning, to brushing your teeth, to having breakfast, to dressing up, to going to work, to working, having lunch, coming home, going to sleep, all of these things have a purpose behind them. They're all purpose-driven actions. They have a meaning behind them. They're meaning-driven actions. So everything we do with meaning and purpose in our lives. More on top of this as well, further, when we make things as human beings, we always design things with purpose. When we make cars, we make them with the purpose. When we make laptops, we make them with the purpose. When we make pens, we make them with the purpose. Whatever we design, whatever we produce, it's with a purpose in mind. When we look at the world around us, when we study the world around us, when we do science, we always try to look at the meaning behind things. What does this do? Why does this do what it does? We always see things through the lens of meaning and purpose. Literally, as human beings, we are purpose-driven creatures. We are meaning-driven creatures in every facet of our lives. So then the question arises, well, what about us, right? At some point in everyone's life, this inquiry about the world around you, the seeking of meaning and purpose, at some point it's going to turn inward. We're going to ask the same questions about ourselves. And we do. What is the meaning of my life? What is the purpose of my life? Why do I exist? And this is where the fundamental issue lies. Every human being is deep down searching for their purpose, searching for the true meaning of their life. Now, on atheism and naturalism, you will never find the answers to those fundamental questions. That question of purpose and meaning, atheism will never provide an answer. It can never provide an answer for all of the reasons I've stated. And I'm going to reiterate that again for us so we can really appreciate this. The reason atheism and naturalism cannot lead to us finding our meaning and purpose, it can't provide answers in this case, is because atheism and naturalism deny an ultimate cause and therefore are acknowledging that everything is one big accident. Accidents don't have a purpose. Accidents don't have a meaning. Our lives are meaningless, ultimately meaningless. Now, this is not a new problem. This has been going on ever since the period of enlightenment. And the enlightenment period is a very interesting time, because it was during the period of enlightenment, after centuries of the West being dominated by Christianity, with the domination of Christianity came a lot of oppression as well. A lot of oppression as far as free thinking was concerned, a lot of oppression as far as the development in science was concerned, medicine was concerned, and all of these sciences that we are so aware of today. The Muslim world never had this problem. The Muslims never had this problem historically. If anything, Islam encouraged, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encouraged us to study the physical world, to study the universe around us. Why? Because it's full of the signs of Allah. Allah's signs are all around us. Allah encourages us throughout the Quran to observe the universe, to study the universe. Allah says, for example, in Imran, where Allah says, "Inna fi khalqis samawati wal ardi wa ikhtilafil layli wan nahari la ayatin li ulil albab." That indeed in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of the night and day, and there are signs for people. Allah tells us to look at the camel and how it was created. Allah continuously points us towards, tells us to observe the heavens, to observe the sun, the moon, the stars. These are all creation of Allah. These are all signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Islam has continued, the Quran as it stands today, we have it preserved. It's telling us to study these things, to look into these things, to do what we call today, if you like, in modern words, science, right? For the very same reason that the early scientists in the West did the science. Because if you look at the reason they did science, it was because they believed there was a core behind everything that exists, the whole universe, that put everything in place and ordered everything. And therefore, what they were doing was they were trying to understand this order, pick up on this order. They were trying to understand the cause of what they were observing. This was the thinking of the early scientists. And this is something that the Muslims have acknowledged and the tradition has allowed for throughout history. However, in Christianity, in Christian Europe, if you look at that particular period, there was a lot of oppression. They didn't want free thinkers. They would burn free thinkers at the stake. There was, they would have to work in closed cells, in small groups, hidden away in, underground bases. And they would do the little experimentation. Whenever they'd be caught, they would literally be treated as witches and the magicians of the time. They would literally be burnt and tortured. Now, eventually what happened was, in the period of enlightenment, during the period of enlightenment, there was a shift. There was finally a shift in the thinking of humanity. Finally, the thinkers of the West managed to free themselves from the oppression of the church. And they, for once now, could do and engage in the sciences. And they managed to encourage the population to do the same, to think in a different way. Now, there was I guess this was one of the good things that happened, but there was a lot of negative things that happened as well. And it's something natural. And you would see this whenever there is a revolution and whenever a group of people finally manage to free themselves from an oppressor, they tend to, it's normally a very sort of aggressive shift. So they completely reject everything the previous ruler had to give, right? So they turn away from everything and they turn a new leaf and they start engaging in this new way of life. Now, this happened, but gradually. Like the early Enlightenment thinkers and philosophers, if you were to ask them, whether they believed in God, they would probably acknowledge, yeah, there is a cause, there is something out there, but they wouldn't acknowledge the Christian conception of God. They wouldn't acknowledge Christianity as a true religion that had come from God. And they started to move away from religion and God slowly over time. Now, inevitably, what happened when they started to do this was they became more secular, they became more godless, they started to focus on the material world. They set a new purpose for humanity. Now, up until the Enlightenment, the purpose of humanity was to attain paradise. Even amongst the Christians, it was to attain the hereafter, what in Nietzsche's words he would call the true world, the real reality that's to come after this life. Right? That was the objective. That was the purpose of people prior to the Enlightenment. But after the Enlightenment, the new objective and new vision that was given to the world was material progress. Right? It's all about material progress. Your purpose now as a human being is to try and make this world your paradise. So paradise went from what was to come in the hereafter, and they wanted to bring it down to the here and now. This world is all you have. You have to create your paradise here. You have to progress materially, right? You have to make this world a worldly utopia, as they say, a perfect world. This was the new vision. However, as they gradually turned away from God and religion, inevitably they fell into nihilism. Because when you turn away from God, well, when you let go of God, you let go of all meaning. You can't ground meaning anymore, as we've seen, as I've discussed already. There's no way of grounding meaning and purpose without God. Morals is another thing, morality, right? Things, and morality and meaning are two fundamental things any human civilization needs to be successful. Without a ground, a moral compass, and without meaning and a direction, a purpose, you can never have a civilization. And this is why we've never had an atheist civilization throughout history. There's never been one, right? Because the fundamental things you need to have a civilization can only be grounded through God, a higher being, a higher power, and a higher anchor. Without God, it's all subjective. It's you make it up as you go along, and that you're not going to get far with that, because everyone's going to think they can make up their own reality. They can choose what's right, what's wrong. They can choose what the meaning is, and so on and so forth. So meaning was a big problem for modernity, and it has been throughout the centuries. And even today, one of the biggest challenges humanity is facing today is the lack of meaning, the lack of purpose. And this is leading to anxiety, as the existentialist philosophers refer to. They call it existential angst. There's this existential anxiety people are suffering from. And we've got evidence of this. I mean, in the West, if you think about, from a material perspective, the average person in the West today has all of the basic needs met, right? They have food, clothing, shelter, all of these things are covered. They have luxuries, things we would consider, if you lived 200-300 years ago, there would be luxuries, fridges in our houses, running water, food at least 3 times a day. We have 3 meals a day. These are things that were only exclusive to the rich, the elite, the kings of the past. But from a material perspective, we have it all today. Yet people are depressed, yet people are suffering from anxiety. So many people in the West, especially now after the COVID, the pandemic, so many people are on antidepressants, Prozac and all of these antidepressants. So something's not adding up. This shows us, this is data, if you like, which highlights to us that it shows that we're not designed to run off materialism, right? We have all of the material goods that we need, the material luxuries that we need, but we're not happy. We're not satisfied. Something is missing. And what's missing is that meaning that we need as human beings, that we're searching for, but we can never find if we continue to turn away from God, if we continue to turn away from Allah. People are never going to find this. And throughout history, philosophers have tried to, if you like, patch this up for people, right? Just to provide a little patch, a temporary fix. So the existentialist philosophers, they came up with many ideas, right? For example, Nietzsche was a very famous philosopher. Many have heard of him. Us have heard of him. Jean-Paul Sartre was another one. These were existentialist philosophers, meaning they were philosophers who dealt with these fundamental human questions. What is the meaning of life? How do we ground morality? And they couldn't give you a conclusive answer. They had to acknowledge, and these guys did acknowledge, that ultimately, without God, you have no meaning. There is no ultimate purpose to life. But what they tried to do was then say, okay, there is no ultimate meaning to life. There is no purpose to life. But what we can do is we can make meaning up for ourselves. We can give ourselves meaning. So, and they try to sell this as a very powerful idea, a very empowering idea, that you are your own God. Essentially, this was the idea that they were selling. You are your own God. You now determine your reality. You now determine what your purpose is. You now determine what's right and what's wrong, right? So this God complex that many people are suffering from today was something that came into fruition around that point in our history, around the 17th, 18th century predominantly, where human beings were told to almost take charge of their lives to the degree where they become gods themselves. And today, I mean, if you go out in the streets and you do street dawah or you speak to people, you realize many people are suffering from this complex. They just think they take themselves as God, their desires as God. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells in the Quran, have you not seen the one who takes his own desires as Lord? They have taken their own desires as Lord. So, and you will see, they say things like, and these people may even acknowledge there may be a power out there, there may be something out there, but I don't want to submit to this power. I know what's best for me. I'm in control of my life. I can achieve things. I can do things. I am powerful. I think this is right. I think this is wrong. The meaning of my life, fine. Ultimately, I don't need ultimate meaning of life. I make my own meaning up. My meaning, the purpose of my life is to do this or to do that. And these are the type of people we see today, right? People who have this delusional concept that they are in control. that they have power, when we know all power belongs to Allah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no power or might except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But these people are completely unaware of it. Completely unaware of it. But every single one of these people at some point, in their lives, maybe if some of these guys, it comes in the form of a calamity, when something goes wrong in their life, and when they realize how vulnerable they are, how little control they have over things. It's sometimes that window opens up for them at that point in their life, where they really are humble, and then they start questioning and looking into, what does different religion have to say? What does Islam have to say? And many people become a Muslim at these points in their life, when the arrogance breaks, when the ego breaks. So we see these types of people today. But fundamentally, even if you tell yourself that, fine, there is no ultimate meaning to my life or purpose to my life, but I'm going to give myself meaning. The meaning of my life is I want to be a doctor. I want to be an engineer. I want to do charity work. Whatever you give yourself. These may be good things to do, right? You may think these are very, from a moral perspective, really sort of substantial things to do for humanity, to be a doctor, to serve humanity, all of these things. These are good causes. But ultimately, what are these people doing? They're just making things up. They're just telling themselves that this is my purpose. So what they've done is they've made it up. They've lied to themselves, right? Now, my question here would be, well, fine. Okay, if you want to do all these things, why not do the opposite? Why not be selfish? Why not go just fulfill your desires? Why not tell yourself that that's your purpose? At least from that perspective, on atheism, you're getting a short-term type of enjoyment, right? And most atheists do fall into that. But some try to elevate themselves above this and say, no, I want to do something substantial in my life. But why does that mean anything ultimately? It does. It's just something you're telling yourself. Ultimately, it's meaningless, whatever you tell yourself. So this is a vicious cycle, if you like, that as long as humanity continues to turn away from God, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would never understand who they really are. They would never know what the true meaning and purpose of their life is. They would never know the answers to these questions. And there's a very interesting ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I think Allah subhanahu it's وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Do not be like those who forgot Allah, and Allah therefore made them forget themselves. They forgot themselves because they forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are the ones who are the true transgressors. They completely transgress all the bounds. And what's really interesting, the word nasiya in Arabic, it's to forget, but lexically it has some very nuanced shades of meaning. One of the sort of nuanced shades here is it's the type of forgetting which is almost deliberate, right? So there's a type of forgetting we have as human beings where we're just, we're forgetful. We wake up, we have to pay a bill, we forgot to pay the bill. It's just left our minds. But it's the type of forgetting where you turn away. It's like you're deliberately turning yourself away or forcing yourself to squeeze some sort of information out of your minds. And this here, the word nasiya is referring to this type of forgetting. It's this turning away type of forgetting, where you're just trying to turn away from your creator. And it's interesting because if you look at it, we have the fitrah as human beings. The knowledge of God, the reality that Allah exists and that He created us to worship Him is a part of our very nature as human beings. It's there within every single human being. It becomes covered and clouded, no doubt, but it's there. So you have to really force yourself to adopt atheism. And that's what the research is showing as well. There's two academics, Olivera Petrovich, who is an atheist. She's an atheist herself. And she's written a book called Natural Theology. And another guy called Justin L. Barrett. I think he's Christian, but he's an academic. And both of them have been studying children for decades. They've focused their work on the study of children and psychology and how children develop. And one area they've really focused in on is the belief in God. And one of their conclusion is, and what the data is showing is that children naturally incline towards the belief in a higher power, a cause, and they make causal links. So, who created the mountains? God did. They naturally incline towards this disposition. It's natural to believe in God. Whereas atheism is an acquired position. You have to really do some work to adopt atheism and have that as your belief system. So it's very interesting that even the data today, the research today is highlighting this idea, this concept of the fitrah, that we have this natural inclination and this disposition to believe in God and to worship Him. So it's fundamentally, and I'll wrap this up on this point, fundamentally, if you turn away from Allah, if you deny God, as most of the world is doing today, and they're slowly moving away. Now the East is slowly following suit, you know, in the same direction as the West is going. And people are turning away from God and they're becoming atheist and secular and naturalist, and they think this is cool. And most people are sheep. Honestly, most people are sheep, especially in the East. Like I come from Pakistan and I've been there several times. They are, you know, most of the students on university campus, it's like smoking. It's just it's something cool. It's something, it's trendy. Everyone's a naturalist. Everyone's an atheist. I want to be an atheist. I want to be a naturalist. And when you ask them what this means, they have no clue, right? They have no clue what they're throwing away, you know, and what they're taking on, and they don't have no clue how this is going to destroy their life and leave them in this pit which they can never come out of. They have no understanding. Most people are sheep, you know, and it's just following the crowd, following what others are doing, and following the West in general, you know. So people need to really understand that atheism is such an empty, hollow worldview. It can't answer those fundamental questions you have as human beings, answers that we need to be able to understand reality, to make sense of life, to live. You can't do this. So what keeps them going? What keeps these atheists going? Is these distractions, dunya. It's materialism, consumerism. You know, we live in a system which is designed to keep you just going. It's almost like a quick dose they give you every day, just to keep you going. As long as you're busy, as long as you're enjoying yourself, you're having fun, you're distracted, whether it's through gaming, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, as long as you keep going, you won't think about these questions. But what COVID did, the pandemic did, was that it cut people off from what they were used to, their lifeline. It cut them off because they had to stay at home. And the rates of suicide went through the roof. The rates of depression went through the roof. It's been crazy. And actually in the UK, they're not even putting out the full data. You know, it's subtle, but they're not really making mention of this because it's quite contagious. The more you hear about, okay, pandemics leading to anxiety, depression, suicide rates, and it can create this psychological effect where it can increase this issue. But this was going to happen. It was inevitable. You know, it was inevitable. So the Achilles heel of modernity is nihilism. And nihilism results from atheism and turning away from God. If people were to really understand Islam, you know, and really understand what this deen has as far as answers, I mean, I think this is a very powerful tool for our dawah as well today, is because this is an angle where we're addressing people with what they need. They need meaning. They need purpose. Islam has the answers. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the whole objective of Allah sending us revelation was guidance. It's hudan lin nas, right? Hudan lil muttaqin. It's guidance for humanity, and guidance specifically for people of taqwa, people that are conscious of their creator. You know, and what is the fundamental guidance? What does Allah tell us? He answers these fundamental questions. Allah tells us what the purpose of our life is. Allah tells us clearly He did not create us for any other reason except to worship Him, to know Him and to worship Him. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. That Allah did not create us for no other reason, and the jinn kind for any other reason except to know Him and worship Him. And more so, look how, subhanAllah, the mercy of Allah, He not only tells us what our purpose is, He clarifies things to the degree where we even know why we're in this life. In Surah Mulk, right in the beginning, Allah tells us that He created life and death to test which of us is best indeed. So our worship, this worship we have to engage in, it has to be done in this plane, in this world where we have choice, free will to choose to either worship Allah or not to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have our lifetimes in this world to engage in that. And if we're successful and we do a good job of it, then we get eternal paradise. So Allah puts everything in perspective for us, makes everything clear, who we are, why we exist, why we're here on this earth. Everything is put into perspective. And this is something very special about Islam, because I can tell you right now, no other religion gives you such a comprehensive understanding of human history, of the human condition, of human purpose. You won't find these answers. You won't find these answers anywhere else. You know, Christianity has a roundabout answer. You know, salvation through believing Jesus, you know, died. You want to believe that Jesus died for your sin. If you believe Jesus died for your sins, you have eternal salvation. Now, Nietzsche, this is a problem. This doesn't answer the question of meaning. You know, it doesn't answer the question of meaning. And Nietzsche, for example, picked up on this, and he refuted Christianity from this perspective, because he said, if anything, this type of idea removes meaning from life. That, oh, okay, so if Jesus has died for your sins and you're guaranteed in eternity, then what's the point of you being here in this world? What are you doing here? You should just die, essentially, right? Because you can go and attain your real life then. You have nothing to do. So he said that religion, and he generalized, but he said that religion removes meaning more meaning than atheism does from one's life.
دين ومكارم وأخلاق ترفعنا فوق الآفاق.
But if he had come across Islam and he had understood how comprehensively Islam addresses, this life and the meaning of life, because according to Islam, it's not a case, well, as soon as you say your shahada and you just sit there and you just wait for death, that you're going to be guaranteed paradise. It doesn't work like that. You have to, while you're here, the years you're here on this earth, the time you're here, you have to spend in worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to spend in doing good deeds, which is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being conscious of Allah, staying away from bad. So in Islam, what happens in this life has a direct bearing on where you end up in the hereafter. So from the Islamic perspective, this life is significantly meaningful. So not only does Allah tell us the meaning of the purpose of our life, but he tells us the meaning behind our life on earth and how significant it is. So Islam comprehensively provides answers to all of these questions. And that's it. I'll wrap up on that, brothers and sisters. So just the key things to take away, I guess, if I just quickly summarize, atheism is a very weak worldview. It has no strong foundations. The whole idea itself of denying God, a creator, a cause, removes the ability from the human being to be able to answer those fundamental questions of life, like the meaning and purpose of life, like morality and all of these things which are essential for human beings, right? And people out there that have turned away from God need the answers. As Muslims, it's our duty, brothers and sisters, because we have been given all of the answers, that we carry these answers to these people. They are thirsty for these answers, and we need to get these to them, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, brothers and sisters. I'll pass over to Sheikh.
MashaAllah, very good summary of atheism and nihilism. And it was very interesting. I found, that the relation between the two and between, the situation we look at. And as Muslims, I think many Muslims, we see the problem that's going on around the world, but we don't really realize where it's coming from. But the way you broke it down, Jazakallah khair, the relationship between atheism, nihilism, and the fact that they're naturalists, and that leads to having no purpose. If there's no purpose, there's no direction. You see the emotional situation of the people, and we see the only thing they have to attach to keep them busy and to keep them distracted is the issue of materialism. And that ends up as even one of the brothers or sisters who's here with us in the session from Japan mentioned that, or said in Japan, that the suicides were actually more than COVID there. And that's been something very famous. And that's an interesting question. I think many people don't reflect on a lot of times. Maybe you've seen the map before of the suicide around the world, and when they put it in different colors. And it's usually the red is the high suicide, blue being in the middle, and then you have like yellow and then white, where there's not much suicide in those nations. And you'll find that the high nations are always the more advanced nations. So that's something where the ones who identify as being as being atheist or agnostic, or whatever it may be. Jazakallah khairan. And if there's any questions the brothers and sisters have, they can put in the chat, inshallah, and we'll see on the bottom if there's any questions. I know there's a lot of comments, which we're not going to read that. One of our brothers, may Allah bless him, Brother Gamal, he wrote a lot of different comments that perhaps can be beneficial. Obviously, there was a lot of them. I wasn't able to read all of them. I didn't see any questions per se, more so just the comments from Brother Gamal. So if anybody has any questions, you can send it now, inshallah. Otherwise, we'll wrap up the session, inshallah. And to benefit more, alhamdulillah, you can join our brother Imran and the other brothers at Sapien Institute. They have all of this course and more courses that are in detail. And also, inshallah, soon, inshallah, I'll be doing some courses there, inshallah, in Arabic, inshallah. That's going to be something new for Sapien Institute, inshallah ta'ala. And also with IERA as well, they also have some good course on this, as we mentioned before. And we've gone through it some with you guys on with myself in Arabic, in GoRap, and our brother Abdurrahim here at Sahaba Academy, Abdurrahim Green, who joined us a couple of months ago. We started the English session, also did a program on GoRap as well. A question did come in where a brother is asking about how do you explain Buddhism or India's flourish under Buddhism? I think Hinduism, maybe you would say. I think they're not really Buddhist, but there are countries that are Buddhist. But in general speaking, they're saying that India is flourishing under Hinduism, maybe we could say. But Buddhism, obviously, is part of the question. That's what he said. So,
see, I personally haven't delved too deep into the Buddhist philosophy, but as far as I've understood it, it's more of a philosophy than a religion. So they don't, as they stand, they don't acknowledge a higher power or a God per se. It's more of a way of life, you know, a way of sort of a type of spirituality without linking it directly to God. And that's why what's really interesting from today's perspective is a lot of atheists now, and you'll see these books popping up now, starting with Sam Harris's book on Waking Up, I think it was called, where they are now moving towards a type of atheist spirituality, right? Which is very funny because, and it's funny, Sam Harris jumped on this very quickly because he realized that there is a need. It's just this innate need for the human being to have spirituality, to have a spiritual sense, you know, practice spirituality. And what he ended up doing was made a sort of mix between Buddhist teachings and his own type of ideas and philosophies. And he wrote his book on Waking Up, which was really strange. And maybe you can discuss it at a later time. But the key thing is that there's a need. The atheists are now starting to promote this type of atheist spirituality. And a lot of times they're turning to sort of Buddhist ideas and teachings because it's an easy picking for them, because there's no link to God or a supernatural being. It's more of a sort of ancient way of life that they can pick up on and reintroduce to atheists, because they're empty. They're empty. Someone I think mentioned it earlier. It's just emptiness. It's a void that they have.
Yeah. I was reading this recently, and I don't know if it's Sam Harris or one of the new atheists who was talking about that, who was upset the fact that you know, they're still counting Buddhism as a religion, and he was very keen on, you know, taking them out and saying, like you said, more of a philosophy.
Yeah.
And that's because many of them, and you'll see even in the West now, and even, you know, a lot of famous people, or even, you know, just general people in general, that they're going to Buddhism as an alternative, looking for that spiritual side, because that's something, you know, that, you know, Allah mentions in the Quran in two different verses. First of all, the one who turns away from the remembrance of Allah. وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. Whoever turns away from my remembrance, he will live a miserable, a difficult life. And this is what you had talked about in the lecture. The people have reached that, subhanAllah, because they have no direction in life. But on the contrary, Allah mentions in the other verse, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ, that indeed through the remembrance of Allah, hearts find assurance. Even, I don't know if you've seen the videos or not, but I always recommend brothers, you know, look at these videos, because it's very interesting that when they talk about the successful, you know, entrepreneurs and who are very successful in their life, and they're talking about from people who are, you know, big businessmen or, you know, like Oprah Winfrey, Barack Obama, whoever it might be, and they look at the things they have in common in their what they call power mornings. And one of the things that all of them focus on is that spiritual time. And even Oprah herself, she has time where she maybe might read a bit of Quran or Bible, or, you know, Hinduism or something from Hinduism or Buddhism. And she reads different things, but she had that spiritual time. And that's because the person, he's in need of that. So any atheists, obviously, in their philosophy or their outlook, they weren't able to find that. So they start to go to certain things like Buddhism now. That's very interesting, subhanAllah.
SubhanAllah. And it's what they want is they want spirituality without submission. They don't want to submit to the creator. They want to remain being their own gods, but at the same time, they want the cake, have the cake and eat it too, as they say, right? And that's what you see. They'll do a pick and mix of different religions and ideas sometimes. Sometimes they'll just do just this, you know, this new age type of spirituality from the Egyptians. Yeah, and Aleister Crowley, I'm sure you've heard of him. He was a very big shaitan. And he wrote this book apparently inspired by the devil himself. And and I don't recommend anyone to read it, but there's sections in there that talk about the law of attraction and these types of concepts, just named differently. So it's almost like that tradition is coming back and repackaged, and people are, so even unfortunately some Muslims are starting to get into this type of stuff as well, which in many cases is shirk, you know, and is very dangerous. We have to be very careful with this stuff, subhanAllah. So the sister's asking about, so the fitra, obviously, as we understand it, is this innate nature that Allah has created every single human being upon. And the Prophet ﷺ, there's many narrations by the Prophet on the fitra. One famous one that we've all read or come across is, well, the Prophet ﷺ said that every child is born upon the fitra, but it's his parents who make him a Jew, a Christian, or a fire worshipper, a Magian or Magian. And this sort of highlights to us that every human being is born upon this natural state of fitra. Link this to the ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought us forth from Adam and asked us, am I not your Lord? And we said, we testify that indeed Allah is our Lord. Now it's interesting, the word used is Rabb. Allah asked us, am I not your Rabb? Which not only means that we acknowledge that Allah is the creator, but the one that sustains us, maintains us, provides for us, and all of these things, which means that naturally we have this innate acknowledgement that there is a cause, a creator who gives us everything. Therefore, a natural inclination to worship and to thank this being emerges from the human heart. So that's natural within human beings, but it becomes covered. It becomes, as the Prophet said, that child is born upon the fitrah, but it's his parents who make him X, Y, or Z. Now you can extend this out that, look at today's society. Every human is being born on the fitrah, this innate disposition, but his parents, his environment, his society is covering and clouding that reality. And that's the type of world we live in today. We live in a secular world, which is not interested in the question of God, in religion or spirituality. So it's inevitable that we're going to be growing up in an environment where the fitrah is being challenged and it's being covered and it's been pushed in, it's being made dormant. So naturalism and atheism are there. And I didn't go into this earlier, but like I said, they're weak, but the only reason they're popular, brothers and sisters, is because they have utility. And what I mean by this is they are useful. And it all links to the whole objective, the philosophy of the world, which is progress, material progress. Now, if you think about, if that is the fundamental philosophy, material progress, then what suits that philosophy? Atheism or Islam? Let's judge between the two. If you think about it, it's atheism. And I'll tell you why. Because atheism tells you there is no God. This is the only life that you have. So again, straight away, it's in line with the idea of material progress, right? Atheism says this is the only life you have, so make the most of it. The idea of material progress coming from the Enlightenment philosophers is, well, this is the only world you have, make the most of it. So it's in line with each other. There's utility, it's useful. The idea of atheism and naturalism is useful for those that are promoting the idea of material progress. It goes hand in hand. This isn't coming from me. There's a really interesting book, his name is Alistair McGrath. He's written a book called The Twilight of Atheism. And in the book, he puts in a really beautiful way. He says, atheism and modernity are two sides of the same coin. And I thought that was a brilliant way he summarized that. They're two sides of the same coin, literally. So it's not because it's atheism is true or it's rational. No, we've seen it's not. It's because it's useful. That's why it's being promoted. Whereas Islam, they're not going to promote Islam. It's because as soon as you promote Islam, what happens? The human being realizes his true objective is not to attain dunya. His true objective is to attain the akhirah. Now, immediately that shifts the human's focus off the dunya and towards the akhirah. Now, that's not going to work well for someone that wants you to focus on material progression, right? It's not going to go down well. Marx himself, there's a famous quote that he made. He said, religion is the opium of the people, right? And one of the reasons he said this was because he was trying to make political ideology, right, of communism. Now, therefore, he wanted people that were doing not too well in society, that weren't doing too well economically and socially, to get motivated to change their condition. But what he noticed was what religion was doing, that it was making people comfortable with the little they had, right? So, and this is one of the reasons he referred to religion as an opium, because it was killing his idea. Because you saw people, what religion did, it brought comfort and peace to human beings, no matter what their social economic standing. So you can see from a modern perspective, the perspective of progress, religion is not useful. Atheism and naturalism are useful.
That's actually one of the things when I was listening to your presentation you did on Sapiens. It was actually one of the things that really stuck out to me was that point. The fact that atheism, why is it being promoted and pushed so hard in media and in schools and from a young age, basically trying to brainwash the people through it. And even the issue of Darwinism, which is going to come obviously next week with Brother Sabor and all of them together, that agenda, because it goes hand in hand with materialism. It's the perfect, yeah. It really pushes the agenda, subhanAllah. Our brother Bilal AK, he did a summary of the entire lecture. So the brothers and sisters, if you check that out in the chat, I thought it was I wanted a long question or a comment, but mashallah, may Allah bless him. He actually put a summary in several posts of the entire lecture. Also, our brother, the one who asked the question, Imran, if you go back to it now, it's right there from the bottom. You'll see like 5 up regarding, you see, when he says it, they're talking about the issue of them depending on testimony, which is actually very interesting.
Yeah, so this is a very good point. So the thing is, most atheists won't claim the universe is eternal, although some would incline towards saying it's eternal. But even if they're basing that claim on science, it's a very weak claim, even from a testimonial perspective, because they depending on the testimony of the scientists, the scientific community. But the majority of the scientific community are in agreement. Not all of them, some of them differ, but most of them agree that the universe had a beginning. Based on all of the evidence that they have at hand, the redshift and all of the measurements that they've done, all of this is pointing towards the fact that there was an origin point. The universe came into existence. They have different models to explain this. They have the Big Bang, the oscillating model, all these different models. But the overall conclusion is that the universe had a beginning. So most scientists are acknowledging this. So those atheists that are saying the universe is eternal and they're trying to base it on the testimony of scientists, it's a very weak claim. It's not the...
Jazakallah khair. Inshallah, that sums it up, inshallah. That brings us to an end. Jazakallah khair. Brother Jutiar always has a gift for our lectures, inshallah.
So Ustadh Imran, Jazakallah khair for this beautiful lecture.
May Allah bless you.
And inshallah, we will wait more lectures from you next year, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. And inshallah, we'll send you, we have just a reminder for the brothers and sisters. We have 2 more lectures this month on atheism, inshallah ta'ala. And with Brother Sabur Ahmed on the 27th, next Saturday, inshallah ta'ala. We'll be talking about Darwinism. And myself, I'll be talking about the new atheism movement, which Brother Imran talked a bit about in the beginning, and he talked about some of the key figures of that movement. So we'll go into some detail on that, inshallah. My lecture on Sunday, on the 28th, inshallah, next weekend, inshallah. The same Zoom link, inshallah, that you guys have. And we have as well for Brother Imran al-Shahada, inshallah, taking part with us today, inshallah. I'll send that to you, inshallah, now on WhatsApp, inshallah. Until next time, jazakumullah khairan, barakallahu fikum. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
فلو قد ذقت من حلواه طعما لا آثرت التعلم واجتهدت ولم يشغلك عنه هوى مطاع ولا دنيا بزخرفها فتنتا.